My name is Silas. I am 38 years old, and I live in the quiet, tree-lined suburbs of Boston, Massachusetts. For over 15 years, I've worked as a senior genetic researcher at one of the top biotech firms in the country. My life has always been defined by precision, logic, and the pursuit of indisputable truth. I spent my 20s grinding in sterile laboratories and my 30s climbing the corporate ladder, all with one singular, unwavering goal: to build a fortress of a life for my family. I thought I had achieved the impossible. My wife, Sarah, was the woman I'd loved since our sophomore year of college, a graceful, soft-spoken kindergarten teacher who seemed to be the very heartbeat of our home. Then there was Leo, our 7-year-old son. He was the light of my life, the reason I worked those grueling 60-hour weeks without a single complaint. Our life was the textbook definition of the American dream. We had the sprawling colonial house, the laughter-filled weekend soccer games, and a marriage that our friends constantly used as a benchmark for their own relationships. I vividly remember sitting on our back deck on a warm September evening, watching Sarah teach Leo how to plant marigolds in the garden. The golden hour light hit them just right, and for a moment, I felt a sense of peace so profound it almost brought me to tears. I believed I was the luckiest man alive. I believed that my home was my sanctuary, a place where deceit simply could not exist. I was so blinded by the beauty of the illusion I had created that I didn't see the shadows creeping in from the corners of my perfect reality. I was a man who decoded secrets for a living, yet I was completely oblivious to the one living under my own roof. It happened on a Tuesday, a day so ordinary it should have been forgettable. I was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee while Leo worked on a school art project near the window. The late afternoon sun caught him at just the right angle, illuminating his face with a clarity I hadn't noticed before. As he looked up to ask me for more glue, I froze. I'm a geneticist. I see the world in patterns, dominant and recessive alleles and inherited markers. Both Sarah and I have deep, dark brown eyes, the kind of dominant trait that usually dictates the room. My parents, her parents, everyone in our immediate lineage shares that same Mediterranean brown. But as the sun hit Leo's eyes, they weren't brown. They were a piercing, crystalline blue. I felt a strange, cold prickle at the base of my neck. In my field, we call it a de novo mutation, when a trait appears out of nowhere. But the statistical likelihood of two homozygous brown-eyed parents producing a blue-eyed child is astronomical, nearly zero. I shook my head, silently scolding myself. Recessive genes skip generations, I whispered under my breath. It's just a fluke, a beautiful, rare fluke. But the thought wouldn't leave. It sat in the back of my mind like a splinter. When Sarah came home later that evening, I watched her. I watched the way she tucked Leo into bed, her movements graceful and practiced. I wanted to ask her about it, about the blue eyes, about the hidden history of her family tree, but I felt foolish. How could I, a man of science, let a simple Mendelian ratio cast a shadow over my wife's loyalty? I dismissed the doubt, buried it under a layer of guilt, and kissed her goodnight. Yet as I lay in the dark, my brain kept running the numbers, and for the first time in 10 years, the math didn't add up. 2 nights later, the splinter in my mind had become an ache. We were sitting in the living room, the only sound being the soft crackle of the fireplace and the rhythmic clicking of Sarah's knitting needles. I tried to stay focused on my journal, but my eyes kept drifting to the framed photos on the mantel. "Sarah?" I started, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet room. I was thinking about Leo's eyes again. Scientifically speaking, it's just so statistically improbable. I've been trying to remember if anyone in your family, maybe a great-grandparent, had blue eyes." The knitting needles stopped. The silence that followed was heavy, almost physical. Sarah didn't look up at first. When she finally did, her expression wasn't one of curiosity, but of sharp, cold indignation. "Are you serious right now, Silas? You're bringing your laboratory home again? Is that what our son is to you? A data point? A statistical anomaly?" "No, honey, that's not what I meant," I stammered, caught off guard by the intensity of her reaction. "I'm just interested in the lineage. It's my job to—" "Exactly. It's your job," she snapped, standing up. "You've been so stressed at the firm that you're starting to see conspiracies in your own living room. My great-aunt Martha had light eyes, Silas. Not that it should matter. What matters is that you're sitting here essentially questioning my character because of a Punnett square." She began to pace, her eyes welling with tears that usually made me move mountains to comfort her. "Do you have any idea how hurtful this is? To imply that I'm anything less than devoted to you because you've spent too much time under a microscope? You're acting paranoid, Silas. It's actually starting to scare me." By the time she walked out of the room, I felt about an inch tall. I sat there in the fading firelight, wondering if she was right. Was I so obsessed with genes that I was hallucinating betrayal? She made me feel like a monster for even noticing the truth. I apologized to her that night in the dark, feeling a deep, sickening sense of shame. I promised myself I would drop it. I promised her I would trust her. But as I closed my eyes, a small, cold voice in the back of my head whispered that she hadn't actually answered the question. The guilt lasted exactly 48 hours. But as a man of science, I knew that while emotions can be manipulated, data is stubborn. The more Sarah insisted I was overworked and paranoid, the more my internal alarm bells screamed. If there was nothing to hide, why was she suddenly taking her phone into the shower? Why was the screen always face down on the nightstand? I began the investigation with the cold, detached precision of a laboratory audit. I didn't start with a confrontation. I started with the digital trail. At 2 a.m., while Sarah's breathing was deep and rhythmic beside me, I slipped out of bed. I didn't go for her phone. I knew she'd changed the passcode. Instead, I went to my home office and logged into our shared cloud account and our joint credit card portal. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I scrolled through the line items. There they were. Small, recurring charges at a boutique hotel downtown, always on Tuesday afternoons, the same day Sarah claimed to be at her advanced teaching seminar. Then I found the archived photos in our shared family cloud, photos she thought she had deleted. They were mostly harmless shots of her at lunch, but one stood out. It was a reflection in a restaurant window. Sarah was smiling at someone across the table. In the reflection, I saw a man. He was tall, athletic, and most importantly, he had a shock of bright, unmistakable blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. The room felt like it was spinning. I felt a surge of nausea, but the researcher in me took over. I needed the biological smoking gun. I walked down the hall to Leo's room. My hands shook as I looked at my sleeping son, the boy I had raised, the boy who called me Daddy. With a heavy heart, I took a sterile swab from my work bag. I gently swiped the inside of his cheek while he drifted in the innocence of sleep. I sealed the vial and whispered, "I'm sorry, Leo." I wasn't just investigating a crime. I was preparing to dismantle my entire world. I was at my lab bench when the preliminary ancestry scan came back. It showed a rare, dormant allele on Sarah's maternal side, a genetic ghost that could, theoretically, produce a blue-eyed child if the conditions were perfect. I felt a surge of relief so powerful I had to sit down. I had been wrong. The science, or at least a very rare one-in-a-million branch of it, offered her an alibi. I spent the afternoon in a fog of self-loathing, wondering how I could have ever doubted the woman who had stood by me for a decade. I stopped at a florist on the way home and bought a massive bouquet of lilies, a silent "I'm sorry" for the accusations I'd only made in my head. I walked through the front door, the flowers in my hands, ready to be the husband she deserved. The house was quiet. Sarah was at her seminar, and Leo was at a sleepover. I went to the kitchen to put the lilies in water, and noticed Sarah's laptop was open on the counter. A tab was active, a real rental site showing small one-bedroom rentals in a city 3 hours away. My stomach did a slow, sickening flip. Why would a happily married woman be looking at studio apartments? Then I saw it. Tucked under the edge of her laptop was a small, crumpled receipt from a local pharmacy. It wasn't for medicine. It was for a home paternity test kit, purchased 2 weeks before I had even started my own investigation. She hadn't been gaslighting me because I was paranoid. She had been gaslighting me because she was running her own secret tests to see if I was actually the father. The rare allele I'd found didn't matter anymore. If she was testing Leo's DNA in secret, she knew the truth was a coin flip. Just then, my phone buzzed with a notification from my lab's secure server. Deep sequencing complete. Results uploaded. I sat in the dark of my home office, the only light coming from the cold blue glow of my smartphone. The air in the room felt heavy, like it had turned to lead, making every breath a conscious effort. My thumb hovered over the download results button. This was it, the moment where my life as I knew it would either be restored or incinerated. I tapped the screen. The PDF opened with agonizing slowness. I didn't look at the summary first. As a researcher, I went straight to the markers, the raw data. I scrolled past the locus identifiers, my eyes scanning the alleles. Match. Match. No match. No match. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It felt like it had stopped entirely. I reached the bottom of the second page, where the clinical, dispassionate conclusion was printed in a font that seemed too small for the weight of the words it carried. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. The world shifted into extreme slow motion. I watched a single dust mote drift through the blue light of my phone, spiraling lazily, indifferent to the fact that my universe had just collapsed. I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the clock in the hallway, but it sounded like a hammer striking an anvil, each second a brutal blow to my chest. 0%. Every memory I had of the last 7 years began to rewrite itself in real time. The night Leo was born, when I cried as I held him for the first time, that was a lie. The thousands of bedtime stories, the scraped knees I'd bandaged, the "I love you, Daddy" whispers before he fell asleep, all of it was stolen property. I wasn't his father. I was just the man who had been paying the bills for a stranger's legacy. I looked at the blonde man in the reflection of the photo I'd found earlier. The blue eyes, the athletic build. He wasn't just a work friend. He was the biological reality that had been living in my house for a decade, hidden behind Sarah's smiles and her "I love yous." The betrayal wasn't a single act. It was a 3,660-day conspiracy. I felt a coldness settle deep in my marrow, a freezing, absolute clarity. The man who had walked into this house an hour ago, carrying lilies and hoping for a misunderstanding, was dead. In his place was someone I didn't recognize, a man who no longer had anything to lose, and a scientist who was about to conduct the most important experiment of his life. The front door creaked open. I heard the familiar jingle of Sarah's keys, the sound that used to bring me so much comfort. I didn't move from my desk. I stayed in the shadows, watching the blue light of the paternity results fade to black on my screen. I was no longer the grieving husband. I was a hunter who had finally located the tracks of the beast. "Silas, why are you sitting in the dark, honey?" Her voice drifted up the stairs, laced with that same sweet, deceptive concern. I took a deep breath, forcing my heart rate to stabilize. When I walked out to the landing, I was wearing the mask I would wear for the next 3 weeks. I looked down at her, the woman I had worshipped, and for the first time, I didn't see my wife. I saw a biological thief. I saw the way her eyes darted to the lilies on the counter, a flash of triumph crossing her face. She thought she had won. She thought her gaslighting had successfully broken my spirit. "Just thinking about work, Sarah," I said, my voice steady and devoid of emotion. "I'm sorry about the other night. You were right. I've been too stressed." She smiled, a warm, radiant lie that would have fooled me a day ago. She hugged me, and I felt a visceral wave of disgust as her skin touched mine, but I didn't flinch. I held her back, resting my chin on her shoulder, staring at the wall. This was the silence of the wolf. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't throw her out in the middle of the night. That was too simple, too quick. If she wanted to play a game of secrets, I would give her a masterclass. Our 10th anniversary was coming up, followed closely by the annual family Christmas dinner. Both our parents, our siblings, the entire kingdom she had built on a lie would be there. I decided then that I wouldn't just tell the truth. I would make them all witness the autopsy of our marriage. I began my final project, ordering 10 ancestry and heritage kits for the entire family. I would present them as a fun, bonding activity, a gift from the paranoid geneticist. I was going to turn our celebratory dinner into a courtroom, and I was going to be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. The 3 weeks leading up to the Christmas dinner were a masterclass in psychological warfare. To Sarah, I was the picture of a reformed husband, attentive, apologetic, and seemingly more devoted than ever. I bought her jewelry, I took her to dinner, and I listened to her talk about her teaching seminars with a polite, vacant smile that she mistook for adoration. Inside, however, I was a cold machine, calculating every move to ensure there would be no escape. I didn't just buy the DNA kits, I curated the experience. I told both sets of our parents and Sarah's siblings that for our 10th anniversary, which coincided with the holiday, I wanted to do something truly unique. "We spend our lives looking forward," I told them over a group Zoom call, my voice dripping with feigned sentimentality. "But as a scientist, I've realized our greatest stories are written in our past. I want us all to map our heritage together, one big family legacy." The kits arrived in mid-December. I made sure to help everyone register their samples using my credentials at the lab to ensure the processing was expedited and, more importantly, that the results were sent directly to me for compilation. I spent my nights in the laboratory, not working on corporate projects, but printing out high-resolution, color-coded charts. I wasn't just looking for heritage, I was looking for the specific markers that would act as a biological fingerprint of Sarah's betrayal. On Christmas Eve, the house was a festive trap. The tree was adorned with gold and silver, and the table was set for 12. Sarah looked radiant in a red velvet dress, flitting around the kitchen, her laughter ringing through the halls as she hosted her parents and mine. She was at the height of her power, surrounded by people who viewed our marriage as the gold standard.
She had no idea that tucked inside the elegant, silver-ribboned envelopes placed at each setting was a document that would strip her of everything. As we sat down for dinner, the atmosphere was thick with warmth and the smell of roasted rosemary and ham. My father raised a glass, toasted to 10 years of a perfect union, and everyone cheered. I caught Sarah's eye and winked. She blew me a kiss, her blue-eyed son sitting right beside her, oblivious to the fact that his father was about to set the world on fire. I felt a surge of adrenaline so sharp it was almost painful. The trap was set, the guests were seated. All that was left was to tell them to open their gifts.
"All right, everyone," I said, standing up and tapping my wine glass. The sharp clink, clink, clink was like a starting pistol. "Before we start the main course, I want you all to open your anniversary gifts. They aren't just heritage reports, they're a map of who we really are. And tonight, I think it's time we all looked at the truth." Sarah smiled, her fingers elegantly tearing the silver seal of her envelope. Around the table, paper rustled. Then, the silence started. It wasn't all at once. It was a wave of cold air that moved from my father to her mother, and finally, it reached Sarah. "Silas," Sarah's voice was a ragged whisper. She was staring at the final page of her report where the bold red text screamed against the white paper. "What is this? It says Leo isn't." "It says he isn't mine, Sarah," I interrupted. My voice was flat, clinical, and terrifyingly calm. "But don't worry, I did the extra research for you. If you flip to the supplemental page, you'll see the unknown relative match. It's a 99.9% match for a man named Mark Henderson. You remember Mark, don't you? The teaching consultant from your downtown seminars?" My mother gasped, dropping her silver fork with a clatter that sounded like a gunshot. Sarah's father stood up, his face purple with rage. "Silas, have you lost your mind? This is Christmas, in front of the boy?" "I lost my mind 10 years ago when I believed her," I snapped, my voice finally cracking like a whip. I turned back to Sarah. She was shaking, the document crinkling in her grip. I can explain," she sobbed, the carefully crafted mask of the perfect wife finally shattering. "It was a mistake, Silas. I was lonely. I didn't know." "You didn't know?" I laughed, a cold, hollow sound that silenced the room. "You bought your own paternity kit 3 weeks ago, Sarah. I found the receipt. You knew exactly whose son he was. You spent 7 years watching me love a child that wasn't mine, watching me work 60 hours a week to build a future for a lie. You didn't just cheat on me, you erased my bloodline." I leaned in close, my face inches from hers, ignoring the stunned, horrified stares of our families. "Dinner is served," I said, grabbing my coat from the chair. "I've already had my fill."
The drive away from that house was the first time in 10 years I felt I could truly breathe. The cold December air rushing through the windows felt like it was scrubbing the scent of Sarah's perfume and her decade of lies off my skin. Behind me, the perfect life I had built was in ashes, but as I looked in the rearview mirror, I didn't feel regret. I felt the cold, hard weight of the truth. The fallout was a nuclear winter. Sarah's family tried to paint me as the villain, claiming my public execution of her character was cruel, but the evidence I had compiled was indisputable. In the divorce proceedings, the DNA results and the records of her secret hotel stays stripped away any claim she had to alimony. Because I had moved the house into a blind trust years prior for tax purposes, she was left with nothing but her packed suitcases and a reputation that was permanently stained in our social circles. As for Mark, the blue-eyed lover, he vanished the moment the secret was no longer a secret. It turns out that destroying a marriage is only fun for men like him when there are no consequences. When Sarah turned to him for shelter, he blocked her number. She ended up in a cramped studio apartment, the very kind she had been scouting while she was still sleeping in my bed. The hardest part was Leo. I still send a monthly check to ensure he's taken care of. I am a scientist, not a monster, and the boy didn't choose his mother's sins. But I haven't seen him since that night. Every time I look at a child with blue eyes, I feel the phantom ache of a phantom limb. I lost a son, but then again, I never truly had one. My name is Silas, and I still work with DNA every day, but I've learned a lesson that no textbook could ever teach me. DNA can tell you who you are related to, but it can't tell you who you can trust. People will tell you that the truth is a light, but they're wrong. The truth is a fire. It can keep you warm, or it can burn your entire world to the ground. And if you're going to live in a house built on lies, you'd better be prepared for the moment the match is struck.